with intelligent talk that stimulates with the issues of the day.
Welcome back to another segment of Inside the News. My name is Guy Wayman, along with Ben and Frank. Ben Brunson of benbrunson.com, the author of The Falstaff Enigma and Esther Sling, and Frank Vernuccio of usagovpolicy.com, the editor-in-chief of the New York Analysis of Policy and Government, and he's also the writer and the voice of the syndicated radio feature Minute Report for America. Hi, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing just great. It's a pleasure to be back.
Okay, Frank, how are you?
Ben, Guy, it's always great to be with you both.
Okay, and glad that you decided to stay over the news break here. CPAC was over the weekend, and Frank, you had the nice opportunity to attend.
I did. It was kind of fascinating. When you cover liberal events as opposed to conservative events tend to talk about issues and solutions to issues. Liberal events tend to talk a bit more about ideology rather than actual solutions. But the big story at CPAC this year was Donald Trump's decision not to go. I had the chance to talk to many of his most ardent supporters who did show up at CPAC, and even they were utterly perplexed at the Donald's decision not to go. He's going to need the conservatives, he's going to need their enthusiasm, and of course, most importantly, he's going to need their votes if he's going to move ahead in the Republican primaries, and certainly in the general election if he gets that far. His decision not to go, I think, demonstrated a bit of political immaturity on his part. CPAC has always been a powerful organization which has significant effects on voter turnout, certainly in the Republican primaries. Among the candidates who did come, of course, were John Kasich, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. All of them did fairly well with the crowd, but it's beginning to become more and more evident that this will turn into a two-person race, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz presenting sort of the cerebral, more in-depth and traditional conservative perspective, and Donald Trump, of course, is the new man on the block, a kind of populist approach to the issues. It's going to be fascinating to watch whether Donald Trump can build on his base. Now, he seems to be doing relatively well. He's gotten up to 40% in some polls. But you wonder whether that other 60% is hardcore and difficult to crack. Although the numbers right now, rather the primary schedule right now, seems to favor Trump a bit, increasingly it seems that conservatives who make up such an important part of the Republican Party are increasingly supportive of Ted Cruz, particularly as it looks as though the Rubio campaign simply is not picking up any traction whatsoever.
No, it's not. Hey, Ben, we kind of missed Frank on stage there with Dana Perino in that panel discussion next to Katie Pavlik, didn't we, Ben?
We sure did. I hope it went well.
Yeah. Okay, Ben, your thoughts over Donald Trump missing CPAC and then some of the latest developments over the weekend.
Well, look, I think Donald Trump's decision to skip CPAC really isn't going to change anything as far as his base is concerned. His base is not a conservative base. It is a populist base. That is the message he's taken. We've talked about it before, but clearly his history would show that he is not a conservative, really, by any stretch of the imagination. And a lot of what he's saying right now seems to be a reaction or an attempt just to win the nomination, which may be quite successful. So we'll see. I think the races, the primaries and caucuses that took place in the last week really clarified a lot of what's going on, a lot of the future on the Democratic side. It's over at this point. Hillary is going to be the nominee, so there's nothing really to discuss there. On the Republican side, I think we saw the fading of Rubio's chances to be the alternative to Trump, the rise of Ted Cruz's candidacy as the alternative, as the conservative alternative. One thing you have to ask yourself, and I've been a Rubio supporter for a while, so this is a hard question that I ask myself, which is, if Ted Cruz dropped out of the race, where would his supporters go? It's not entirely clear that all of his support would go to Rubio. It might go 50-50 to Trump and Rubio, because a lot of his support is the anti-establishment support. On the converse, though, if Rubio drops out, I think you have to assume that the vast majority of his supporters, like myself, would turn to Ted Cruz and not to Donald Trump. And I think that's the strongest argument, to have a two-man race that is Trump versus Cruz. I think it's healthy for the party. The way I see it, it is very unhealthy for the party for Donald Trump to back into the nomination by winning a plurality in all these states, and that's what he's done. And even if he wins Florida, it's going to be by a plurality vote. If he happens to beat Kasich in Ohio and it's neck and neck there and it's close in Florida, those are both winner-take-all states, and he'll win with a plurality of the vote in both cases if he does win. And I just think that's an unhealthy situation for the party. It really needs to be, we really need to see at this point Rubio and Kasich drop out either now or after March 15th, when both of their states are voted upon. If either one pulls out a state win, that might be an excuse to continue on, and continuing on is just handing the nomination to Donald Trump.
Ben, I agree with your assessment about who the delegates would go to based on who dropped out. But my concern is this: is that Trump is the anti-establishment. We know that, and he's really disrupting it, and so he's attracting the millennials in that regard. But Ted Cruz, not having any friends outside of Jeff Sessions in the Senate, is not really well liked, and he's so extreme on the far right that there's not that magnetism that Trump has, as far as, that kind of resounding thing. But what happens is that they're both disliked in polls as well, Frank.
I had to chuckle a little bit when you're saying that, because I'm old enough to remember very, very well the Ronald Reagan campaign.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying is exactly what people said about Ronald Reagan in many ways. Now, of course, Ronald Reagan had a wonderful personality, and Ted Cruz is more, I think, serious, less congenial, perhaps is a better way to put it. But most of the arguments you're saying are exactly what was said about Ronald Reagan. When you win a presidential contest, I think your popularity tends to go up in the Senate to some extent. Ted Cruz would probably be wise to pick someone as his vice president who does have great relations with the Senate, and I think he would be able to manage affairs that way. One of the things that Ted Cruz never really gets credit for, and I think he must be wailing and gnashing his teeth in light of Donald Trump's popularity, is the fact that Cruz is the actual outsider. He's the one who actually gave up a lot to fight against the Republican establishment when it didn't live up to its conservative ideals. He's the one that became unpopular in the Senate. He's the one that probably, I think, hurt himself a lot on a personal basis by sticking to his ideals. And I don't think he really gets sufficient credit for that. So I think, should he be elected president, I think perhaps his reputation of toughness will go a long way to bringing the Senate in line. And I think a combination of the new people brought into interest in politics by Donald Trump, as well as the enthusiasm of conservatives, would be a pretty strong bludgeon to use against the Republican leadership in both houses of Congress to go along with a more conservative agenda that Ted Cruz would probably push.
Okay, I'm going to extrapolate here a little bit, so Ben, work with me on this. Ben, Donald Trump becomes the nominee and he becomes the president. He picks a great running mate, and then he nominates Ted Cruz as the next Supreme Court justice to follow in Scalia. That would be optimum, because Cruz would then have a good 20 or 30 years of influence, where being a president, you only have about 4, maybe 8 max. That would probably be a really good move.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to see Ted Cruz replace Antonin Scalia. I think he would be a like-for-like replacement in terms of his belief system and his ability to maintain that belief system during his tenure on the court. So that's a pretty attractive outcome from that perspective.
And you heard it first right here on Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio.
That's right. Assuming Trump would nominate Ted Cruz. But who knows? He has to have... First, the Republicans have to retain control of the Senate to have the right person make it through when the next president comes along to nominate a Supreme Court justice. And, of course, we need to have a Republican president. Otherwise, Hillary Clinton's going to be making that choice.
Okay, talking about Hillary Clinton here, Frank. The man who designed the server and put it in her restroom or closet or whatever it was, bathroom there. Hillary's in a world of hurt.
Yeah, she is. It's clear that if an indictment does not come down, it might be almost as damaging as if it did come down, because the public is going to see that as the use of political influence to overcome the judicial process. And that, of course, is never a good thing in terms of public relations. Mm-hmm. I continue to believe, however, that the scenario will play out this way. There will be an indictment of some sort that comes down, but the president will issue a pardon to Hillary Clinton, claiming that the indictment comes in a political year and is politically motivated. The president is increasingly implicated in all this because it appears that the president has had a series of emails which he personally sent to Hillary Clinton, meaning the president was indeed aware that Hillary Clinton was using a private server. So the president has every reason to extend a pardon to her for his own political purposes, his own reputation purposes. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You also wonder whether the latest revelations about Hillary Clinton and her lawlessness, quite frankly, there's no other way to put it, how that's going to play to the millennials. The millennials, of course, so far have been demonstrating a proclivity towards the far-left message of Bernie Sanders, but it's also a message of revulsion towards the entitled establishment. And who is more part of the entitled establishment than the Clinton family, which has broken just about every law they've come across that has been inconvenient to them. And I think it presents a really unattractive image to the millennials, who are a traditional strength of the Democratic Party.
You know, Frank, you bring up a good point about the millennials and the fact that they did not grow up under the Clinton regime in the 90s, so they don't know these people, and they just heard about it in rumors, and some of them weren't even born back then. And, Frank, they don't even know who Hillary truly is.
Yeah, also, I think that they're going to look at a couple of other things as well in terms of traditional support for Democrat candidates. Remember, it was Bill Clinton who signed the trade normalization agreement with China in 2000, which pretty much was the death knell for American manufacturing jobs. So I think you're going to see a lot of blue-collar workers, again a traditional strength of the Democrat Party, who have an axe to grind against anybody named Clinton, and I think they might use that axe against the Clinton should she become the candidate.
Okay, Frank opened the segue for jobs in the economy, Ben, and things are still not good, even though the job report came out okay.
Well, the job report was decent, but it was mediocre. And the reality is that as we have been for years now, we are growing at roughly 2% baseline, which is problematic on many levels. At a 2% GDP growth year in and year out, you're just treading water. That is insufficient growth to expand the tax base, to expand the wealth of the working class. We've seen the median incomes for the working class decline for a long time now, or hold steady at best. And at 2% growth, we're not going to see that impacted very much. So because the policies of this administration economically have been such a wet blanket over the economy, we've had this 2% growth range that we've been stuck in. And the problem is, with the global economy slowing down, it's going to be hard for us even to maintain that 2% growth rate. So I'm frankly looking at 1.5% to 2% range for this year. And that reflects the slowdown in Europe, the slowdown in China, and it's just it is a different world from the averages of the post-World War II growth in this country, which have been in excess of 3%.
Well, our resident astronaut here, Frank Vernuccio, loves NASA, and talk to us about the NASA's part of the new budget.
Well, NASA's budget is again cut. And what's more important than the overall cut in the NASA budget, it's cut about 1%, but what's more important is the shifting of emphasis of NASA and the shifting of, correspondingly, of funds. NASA's traditional role in the minds of most Americans has been opening up space for manned exploration. But NASA has shifted its emphasis under the Obama administration from putting people in space, building an infrastructure in space that can be used to open up new technology and new wealth for the United States eventually, to fulfilling the president's global climate change policies. Money has been shifted from the manned space program to something called Earth Science. Now, that sounds like something like a regular good scientific endeavor, except that much of the Earth science activity has been little more than using various NASA facilities to try to push the president's climate change agenda. That is not the traditional role of NASA, and there are other agencies that do that anyway, but we're seeing the collapse of the American manned space program, something I think that's rather unpopular with the American public. The president prematurely ended the Space Shuttle program. It was supposed to be replaced by something called the Constellation program, a new type of spacecraft for humans to use. The president canceled that, too. Then he went to the Orion program, the stuff that's currently on the books, but it's so sparsely funded that even if it continues at this point, if the president doesn't decide to go and cancel that as well, it couldn't put a man in space until 2023. At that point, we're way behind the eight ball. All these fantastic stories you're hearing about NASA planning to go to Mars, NASA planning to return to the moon, and so forth, it is quite literally pie in the sky, or should I say pie in space, because without the funding, you can't do any of that stuff. And it's ironic that it's occurring at this stage when we're beginning to see a really solid potential for a massive financial payout from our space technology. To cancel all this at this point doesn't make any financial sense whatsoever.
No, it doesn't. All right. Hey, we're out of time here, but we've got to give you guys your hot topics and what you like to talk about. So, Ben, your final thoughts.
Well, bid adieu to legend in football, Peyton Manning. I'm glad to see him retire, and I think it was very tempting of him to spend another year in the NFL and take the money that would come with it. Certainly, some team or another would have hired him. So I'm glad that he made the decision to retire while he was on top of the game.
Well, very, very nice. Frank, your final thoughts.
Russia has just formed another 3 divisions of its military. It's placing it on its western border with Europe at the same time that both Europe and the United States continue to underfund their militaries. The Russians will never have a better chance than they have in the next 10 months to exert their influence. They don't actually have to use military power, just the threat of it. And it's going to be really touch and go until a more national security-minded president takes the Oval Office.
All right, Frank Vernuccio, and you can find him at usagovpolicy.com. And Ben Brunson, you can find him at benbrunson.com. Thank you so much, Frank.
Great being with you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Guy and Frank. Always a pleasure.
All right, that finishes another edition of Inside the News. We'll be back.